Hi, I'm Isannah. My parents raised me to believe that loyalty meant silence. But last month, they filmed my sister grinding my face into the living room carpet and stood there, recording. No one stepped in. The next day, they came to my door, on their knees, begging. But was it guilt? Or just the fear of what I had in my hands? A neighbor's video, a lost deed, a confession they never meant to be heard. And now I keep wondering, was I ever truly their daughter? Or just a role they needed filled until it was time to erase me? They say Sunday brunch in Larchmont is an institution. Sun hats, champagne flutes, the subtle hum of someone bragging about their child's college acceptance like it was divine intervention. I stood near the trellis in our backyard, pretending to sip the same mimosa I'd been holding for half an hour. Not because I was enjoying it, but because I'd run out of excuses to keep walking away. The air buzzed with polite laughter. Everyone was here to celebrate my sister, Valmai, again. She'd just been featured in a regional magazine, some puff piece about women who inspire. She inspired, all right. Inspired exhaustion, inspired irritation, inspired my mother to throw this entire backyard circus with borrowed floral arrangements and catered pastries, though she conveniently forgot to mention that I, her other daughter, made all the desserts on the table, every last tart and hand-piped eclair. Not that anyone noticed. "Excuse me, are you with the staff?" a woman asked, holding out her empty glass toward me. I blinked, glancing at the pale yellow sundress I'd worn, clearly not a uniform, but not enough sparkle to be one of them either, apparently. "I live here," I said, voice steady. She laughed like it was a joke. "Oh, sorry, you just looked so busy." My mother, standing within earshot, smiled at the woman but didn't correct her. Didn't say, "This is my daughter." Didn't say my name, just kept nodding, like I was an assistant or invisible, or both. I smiled back the way I've practiced since I was 13, tight, polite, polished, a mask with lipstick. "Valmai's speech is starting soon," someone announced, and the crowd shifted like synchronized birds. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because standing alone while everyone flocked to her felt too much like a metaphor I couldn't bear just then. Valmai raised her glass, perched on the low steps near the garden's edge. The late spring sun framed her like a Hallmark card. She wore white, of course, and her hair was styled like she just stepped out of a salon that only takes clients with last names like Rockefeller. "So, I know you're all here to celebrate this lovely little article about me," she began with a theatrical sigh. "But I thought I'd share a story that proves I've always been destined for the spotlight." Laughter. "I found something while cleaning out our parents' attic, something vintage, a gem, really." She pulled a small notebook from behind her back. I felt my heart stop. No, it was mine. My childhood diary. "Page 23, she announced, opening it with flair. "Dear Diary, if I ever meet a boy who likes me back, I'll name our first daughter Daisy and teach her not to be afraid of everything, like I am." More laughter. "Isn't she adorable?" she cooed. "Little Isannah, dreaming about love and daisies." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My mouth was dry. I watched my father laugh so hard he slapped his knee. A guest leaned toward me and whispered, "You're such a good sport." Was I? Is that what I was doing? Being a good sport? Valmai read 3 more passages, each more humiliating than the last. Me worrying I'd never be kissed, that my thighs were too wide, that I wished someone would notice when I entered a room. The audience laughed, not with me, but at me, even though I wasn't laughing, even though I hadn't given her permission to read a single word. When she finally closed the notebook, she curtsied like it was a theater performance. The applause was real, and cruel, and loud. I didn't storm off. I didn't scream or cry. I stood there, smiling, lips trembling only a little. I've been trained well. After the last guest left, I stayed to help clean. My mother carried a tray of half-finished mimosas into the kitchen, her heels clicking across the tile. She didn't mean anything by it, she said without turning around. She read my private diary to a crowd. She was being playful. "Don't make this a thing, Isannah." I rinsed a glass under the tap, the water almost hot enough to scald. You know how Valmai is, she added, tossing it like a well-worn excuse. I dried my hands slowly. And you know how I am? She finally turned to me. You're sensitive, always have been. That's not a bad thing, but you need to learn how to take a joke. I nodded because fighting her meant nothing would change. I had tried before. Every confrontation ended in the same way, me being dramatic, Valmai being misunderstood, my mother being tired. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with the lights off. My phone buzzed once, Valmai's Instagram. A new story, her holding the diary, captioned, "Guess who had all the feelings growing up? Hashtag sibling stuff, hashtag too cute." My cheeks burned again. Why? I whispered. Is it always funny when it's me on the floor? 2 days later, an old college friend texted me. Hey, was that your diary she read in the clip? It's going around. I stared at the screen. I hadn't known it was recorded. Yes, I typed. Then deleted. Then typed again. Yeah. Jesus, Issa, that wasn't okay. I didn't reply. Seriously, she added. That wasn't a joke. That was targeted humiliation. Her words hit harder than Valmai's ever could, because they didn't come with a smile. They came with recognition. I found myself wondering, had I ever done the same? Laughed along with someone else's pain because it was easier than speaking up. I pulled out the old photo album from my closet, flipped through birthday parties where Valmai blew out my candles, Christmas mornings where every camera pointed only toward her. I'd smiled in the background, always in the background. That night, I opened the video. There was Valmai, basking in the laughter. There was me, stiff in the crowd, face flushed. And there, in the background, clear as day, was my mother, holding her phone up to record, smiling as if this was the moment she wanted to preserve forever. She was still smiling when she filmed me. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, the city skyline was dimming in that way it does when it's too early for sunset, but too late to call it day. I dropped my purse onto the entry table and kicked off my flats, the pressure behind my eyes still pulsing from the brunch 2 days ago. I hadn't talked to Valmai since her little performance, and I'd ignored every "wasn't she hilarious" text that followed. The voicemail blinked red. I pressed play without thinking. Hello, Ms. Walker. This is Janet Krause from East Point Law. I'm calling to confirm receipt of the transfer paperwork for the property on Highland Avenue, now legally listed under Ms. Valmai Fletcher. Please give us a call if you have any questions. Thank you. I froze. My first reaction wasn't shock. It was confusion, like I had misheard the name, or maybe this was a prank. The house on Highland, my grandmother's home. The place where I spent every Thanksgiving, where I'd wash dishes beside her humming voice, the one she told me would one day be mine. I redialed immediately. Janet answered, chipper and efficient. Hi, yes, this is Isannah Walker. I just got a message saying, wait, you're saying the Highland property is now in Valmai's name? Yes, she submitted the transfer paperwork last week, fully notarized. Your parents co-signed since the original title was under Eleanor Walker's joint authority after the estate freeze. I gripped the counter. No one told me. My grandmother. She said it was mine. There was a polite pause. I'm sorry, but we only process what we're given. All documentation was approved legally. After the call ended, I stood there in silence. Was I imagining her promise? Had I invented the warmth in her voice when she said, "One day, this will be your sanctuary"? I grabbed my coat and keys and drove without thinking, not bothering to change out of the jeans and faded sweatshirt I'd thrown on that morning. The house sat about 10 minutes away. I hadn't been there since the funeral. When I parked across the street, the garden was blooming. Peonies she planted herself decades ago, thriving without her. But what made my stomach flip was the sign, "For sale, open house this weekend." I got out of the car, walked up the driveway, and stared at the front porch. New paint. Valmai's touch, the same shade of taupe she insisted was neutral yet elite. I rang the bell, but no one answered. I didn't expect them to. Just standing there felt like betrayal, like I was trespassing on something that was supposed to be mine. Inside, I imagined the tiny sunroom where my grandmother kept her puzzles, the kitchen with the chipped ceramic tiles. the hallway where I'd hung fairy lights for her 80th birthday. Every corner of this place carried my fingerprints, memories she and I created. Valmy never visited, not even when our grandmother was bedridden. Hospitals smell like death, she'd said, but now she owned it. I drove straight to my parents' house. They were expecting me for dinner, though I doubted they anticipated this conversation. Dinner was laid out with the usual precision: cloth napkins, roasted chicken, candles lit. My father sat at the head of the table, reading the Wall Street Journal as if nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. "Smells great," I said without feeling. "Glad you could make it," my mother replied, placing salad bowls in front of us. "We didn't think you'd still be sore about Sunday." I didn't respond. I waited until we'd passed the bread and my dad had taken his first bite. "I got a call from a lawyer about Highland." He chewed slower. "Ah, yes. That. You gave it to Valmy." My mother shifted in her chair, tucking a napkin into her lap. "We thought she'd put it to better use." "You mean she'd flip it for a profit?" My father set down his fork. "Isannah, it's just a house. You're renting anyway. She's looking to settle down." "Settle down with what? A list of people she's steamrolled?" "That's not fair," my mother warned. Valmy entered the room with perfect timing, pulling off her coat like she was walking onto a stage. "Hey, sis, thought we weren't doing family drama at dinner." I stared at her. "You filed transfer documents behind my back." She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe you should have gotten it in writing. You know how Grandma was, always vague, always sentimental." I turned to my parents. "Did she want this, or did you just decide I didn't need anything?" My mother sighed. "This attitude is exactly why it made more sense to give it to Valmy." I didn't answer. I just stood up, left my plate untouched, and walked out the front door. Back at my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan, turning slowly, like it was mocking my spiraling thoughts. Around midnight, I dug out a dusty box from the hallway closet. Inside, old family VHS tapes. I hooked up the ancient player to my television. First tape, my 10th birthday. The camera shook as I ran toward the cake, laughing. But just as I reached for the candles, Valmy shoved ahead and blew them out. I paused the tape. In the background, my mom's voice. "Let her, Izzy. It's just a cake." Second tape, high school awards night. I stood on stage, holding my certificate for a full scholarship to Columbia. But the camera lingered not on me, but on Valmy sitting in the audience, face twisted in a pout. The footage cut there. No applause. No record of the award. Just her. I sat back on the couch, remote limp in my hand. It hadn't started with the house, or the diary, or the party. It started before I even understood what was happening. In the morning, I opened my phone and deleted every voice memo labeled, "Maybe I'm being unfair." One after another, my voice, excusing their actions, rationalizing their choices, silencing myself. I dressed quickly and walked downtown, stopping outside the real estate office listed on the Highland Avenue sign. I stared through the glass doors at the front desk, the receptionist already typing at her computer. This time, I wasn't here to ask for clarity. This time, I'm not letting it go. The text came through while I was sorting through mail, junk mostly, a dentist appointment reminder, and a catalog I never subscribed to. Valmy's name flashed across the screen, followed by a cheerful group message. "Game night at the house. Let's reset." No apology, no acknowledgement of anything, just 3 words. "Let's reset." I stared at it longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room. The other part, the part I hated for still craving peace, hesitated. Maybe, I told myself, this was an olive branch, a broken one, sure, but something. That night, I stood on my parents' porch again, holding a bottle of white wine I grabbed from a gas station. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door like nothing had happened, her lips already mid-smile. "You came." "Oh, good. We just started charades." The living room was glowing, candles lit, jazz playing low in the background. Dad held a cocktail glass, laughing with a neighbor I hadn't seen in years. Valmy sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping cards. "Look who showed up," she said, as if this was a casual Thursday night and not the aftermath of a betrayal. I sat on the farthest end of the couch. Charades started. They acted out dumb things: tax audit, wedding jitters, inheritance drama. That last one got a good laugh. Valmai smirked in my direction. I didn't flinch. "Love your shoes, sweetheart," Mom said to Valmai during a break, touching her arm. "That taupe leather really screams elegant." Valmai sipped her wine. "They're custom. Got them with the deposit from the house." I clenched the stem of my glass. She said it like she was talking about a new handbag, not the house she stole. "That house was promised to me," I said, voice low. Valmai tilted her head. "We're really doing this tonight?" "No. We're doing this now." The room quieted. Even the neighbors shifted uncomfortably. My father cleared his throat. "Can't we have one night where no one brings up legal threats?" "You brought those on yourselves," I said, standing slowly. "And don't pretend it's just about a house. It's about every moment you let her take something from me and smiled while she did it." Valmai stood too, quick, like she couldn't let me have height in this conversation. "You've always had a persecution complex, Izzy. Since we were kids, everything's some attack. Maybe it's not everyone else. Maybe it's you." "Right, me. The girl who watched her sister blow out her birthday candles, delete her college essay, steal her job lead. Should I go on?" She laughed. "You sound insane." I stepped forward. "And you sound guilty." That's when she shoved me. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't hard, but it was deliberate. A palm against my shoulder, just enough to knock me backward. My heel caught the edge of the rug. I stumbled, fell. I landed on the carpet, elbows scraping, knees folded awkwardly beneath me. And just when I tried to push up, Valmai was on top of me, hands at my shoulders, then one at the back of my head, my face pressed into the fibers, the scratch of wool burning into my cheek. "You deserve this," she hissed. "You always have." I barely registered the rest. Somewhere above, I heard my mother's voice, calm, casual. "Valmai, enough." And my father sighing, "Just let it blow over." Blow over? I rolled slowly to my side. My cheeks stung, red from the carpet. Valmai stood above me, brushing her hair off her face like she was the victim. No one moved to help me. I got up without a sound. No anger, no tears. I walked out the door. My car was parked crooked on the curb, but I didn't care. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from coming apart. The mirror didn't lie. A raw, red smear ran across my cheekbone. I touched it lightly. It burned. Back in my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I laid down on the living room floor and stared at the ceiling, letting the darkness wrap around me like a question with no answer. I remembered the scissor cut, Valmai pretending to style my hair at age 7, then snipping off a chunk of bangs. "I didn't mean to," she said. My mother believed her. I remembered the science fair, my volcano project in ruins, glue poured into the base. "Probably just tipped over," Dad said. "Things happen." And now? A face burned into the rug, and still, just let it blow over. Not this time. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mia, college roommate, now a paralegal in Manhattan. "It's late," she answered, voice groggy. "What counts as assault in New York?" Silence. Then, "Tell me what happened." I told her everything, every word, every moment. She didn't interrupt. When I was done, she said, "Document it. Take pictures. Make notes. And Izzy, don't let it go." I hung up, then walked to the bathroom. Took a dozen photos, angles, timestamps, mirror selfies. Then I logged into the security app for the family's porch camera and downloaded the time frame. I opened my laptop, created a folder, named it Truth. Inside, the first entry, Valmai, carpet incident, date April 12th. Witnesses, Eleanor and Robert Walker. Action taken, none. No emotions, no embellishments, just facts. I added the photo. Then I scrolled through my voice memos. Dozens of them, all titled the same way. Maybe I'm being unfair. I deleted every single one. They weren't evidence. They were erasures. My hand hovered over the keyboard. I created a new video file, saved the camera footage, then titled it what she'd whispered, "Deserve this, MP4." The bathroom mirror didn't soften anything. Not the red scrape running along my cheekbone, not the swelling near my temple, and definitely not the reality staring back at me. I leaned in closer, letting the harsh morning light from the window highlight every line on my face. There was no denying it. The burn was real, and so was the silence that followed it. No one had reached out, not a single message. No, "Are you okay?" Not even a curt apology masked as concern. My parents hadn't called. Valmai hadn't texted. As if what happened 2 nights ago had simply vanished, folded into the pages of our family history, the way all inconvenient truths seem to be. But I couldn't unsee it. Mom raising her phone while I was on the floor, recording instead of stopping Valmai. I kept asking myself, why? What purpose did that serve? Entertainment? Evidence? Control? It brought back a moment I hadn't thought of in years. I was 12. I broke my wrist during a school dance rehearsal. Fell straight onto the gym floor. My mother was in the audience. I remembered crying, cradling my arm. She walked toward me, not with outstretched hands, but with her phone out, filming the scene. Later she posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Tough little dancer takes a spill." Got over 100 likes. They never defended me. They documented me. I grabbed my phone and opened the voice memo app. No more inner monologues echoing inside my head. I needed them outside. Somewhere real. I hit record. This is Isannah. Today's date is April 14th. I am documenting the aftermath of what occurred at my parents' home on April 12th. Physical injury noted. Emotional impact ongoing. No response from family. No acknowledgement. My mother recorded the incident. She did not intervene. The red light blinked in the corner of the screen, and for the first time, it felt like I was reclaiming the same tools they used against me. A knock interrupted my next entry. I peered through the peephole and blinked. Mrs. Crossley, my elderly neighbor from across the hall, stood there holding a Tupperware container and a brown envelope. I opened the door. "Hi, Mrs. Crossley. I brought you some soup," she said, eyes scanning my face. Her expression shifted. "Oh, sweetheart. What happened?" I paused. Family game night went sideways. She didn't laugh. Instead, she handed me the container and the envelope. I heard shouting. It's not my business, but my Ring camera faces the hallway. It picks up the apartment entrance across the street, too. I frowned slightly. I was going to delete the footage, but I didn't. Just in case you ever needed it. Inside the envelope was a USB drive. My throat tightened. "I didn't want to assume," she added softly, "but I watched the clip. And honey, that wasn't a stumble. That girl pushed you." I blinked away a sting. "Thank you. No one deserves to be hurt in their own family," she said, her voice firm. "Not physically, not emotionally, and not while their mother stands by filming it." I nodded, speechless. She patted my arm. "You've always been quiet, too polite for your own good, but sometimes being quiet is how they get away with it." When she left, I sat down and opened my laptop. The file loaded fast, no sound, just grainy footage of the street. My parents' porch camera had been blocked from that angle, but Mrs. Crossley's Ring caught everything. Valmai reaching, me falling, my mother standing back with the phone held steady. The footage lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it was enough. There was a frame where my mother turned slightly. The smirk was unmistakable, casual, familiar. "She'll be fine," she said, clearly audible despite the muffled quality. "She always is." I hit pause. That woman, who smiled at baby showers and quoted Maya Angelou on fridge magnets, looked like a stranger in that clip. But she wasn't. She was who she had always been when no one else was looking. Later that afternoon, I pulled a faded box from my closet. It smelled like cedar and old paper. Inside were journals from when I was 19, pages of spiraling thoughts, underlined self-doubt, and sessions I barely remembered. One entry stopped me cold. I told Dr. Riley that I feel like I'm living someone else's life, that I'm the second draft of Valmai, not the favorite, not the star, just the space filler. I remembered that session. I came home and told my mother I wanted to keep going. Her response was immediate. "You're not depressed, you're dramatic." Dad chimed in, "Of course. Therapy's for people with real problems, not suburban girls who had too many piano recitals." I quit that week. Canceled the next session. Threw the payment invoice in the trash before they could see it. Now, rereading those words, I felt something shift, not sadness, not anger, precision. I scanned the entries and bookmarked key pages, anything that hinted at patterns. I opened a new document on my laptop. Therapy history, suppressed narrative. It was time to gather my facts, not stories, not feelings, documentation. I opened another folder, password protected, and uploaded Mrs. Crossley's video. Then I added a screenshot of my bruised cheek, the timestamp, and a still frame of Valmai's hand at my shoulder. Each item was tagged, labeled, dated. Witness: Eleanor Walker. Action: none. Witness: Robert Walker. Statement: let it blow over. Perpetrator: Valmai Fletcher. Quote, "You deserve this." I created a separate document for potential witnesses and legal references. It wasn't vengeance, it was preparedness. I opened a chat with Mia. "Hey, got a neighbor video. Need help sorting what counts as admissible? You around?" She replied instantly. "You're damn right I am. Upload it all." I stared at the folders. This wasn't just a collection, it was a case file. I wasn't documenting pain. I was building a perimeter, a barrier between me and the version of myself they thought I still was. Later that evening, I poured a glass of water and sat back down. I replayed the ring footage again. This time I watched my mother, not Valmai, not the act, just her. There was no panic, no flinch. She blinked slowly, then adjusted her phone for a better angle. It hit me, not just what she didn't do, but what she chose to do. They didn't protect me because they never saw me as someone worth protecting. They recorded me like I was a warning, not a daughter. The morning air felt sharper than usual, like the sky was holding its breath right alongside me. I stood outside the county courthouse, a thin manila folder tucked under my arm, fingers cold from nerves more than the weather. I hadn't told anyone except Mia that I was coming here today. Not that anyone in my family would have cared to know. Inside, the courthouse was quiet, sterile, and humming with the low murmur of paperwork shuffling and lives being dissected behind closed doors. I approached the clerk's window, my palms slightly damp. "I'm here to file for a protective order," I said. My voice didn't waver, but I could hear how tight it was. The woman behind the glass looked up, scanned me once, then slid a stack of forms through the slot. "You'll need to include documentation of the incident, witness names, and any supporting material. You can submit it digitally or here." I handed her a flash drive. "Everything's on this." Photos, video, written statements. She inserted it into her computer and clicked through the files. I watched her brow crease slightly. "This is very thorough." "I had time," I said. She printed a few forms, clipped them together, and passed them back with a pen. "Sign at the bottom of each page." As I scribbled my name, neat, deliberate strokes, I felt something unlock. It wasn't satisfaction or revenge. It was relief. For the first time, my reality was going on record. On the way out, I texted Mia. "Filed. It's official." She responded with 3 words. "About damn time." I walked out of the building and onto the steps, the weight of silence finally off my shoulders. But I knew the fight hadn't even started yet. Back home that evening, I began sorting through boxes, old files, notes, anything I'd once tucked away in drawers for another time. Near the bottom of one folder marked medical, I found it. A yellow envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. To be opened by Isannah only. My heart kicked. It was my grandmother's handwriting. I sat on the floor and opened it slowly. The paper fragile and creased. Her letter was short, but every word felt like she was whispering it straight into my ear. "My sweet Izzy, if you're reading this, I hope you're somewhere safe. I want to tell you what I never said aloud. I always knew about how they treated you, about what they saw when they looked at you, or more often, what they chose not to. The house was always meant for you. I told your parents. I wrote it down. But when I got sick, they pressured me, told me Valmai needed it more, that you were too fragile to deal with real estate. I didn't have the strength to fight them then, and I've carried that shame with me. You were my sanctuary. I wanted you to have one too. Love, always, Grandma. I didn't cry, not like before. But I folded the letter gently and placed it in a protective sleeve. It was proof, not just of their manipulation, but of her belief in me. The next morning, the storm rolled in. My phone rang at 8:04 a.m. I answered, already knowing who it was. "We received notice of your filing," my mother said, voice clipped like she was reading a press release. "Is this really necessary?" I said nothing. "You could have talked to us," she continued. "Now we're dealing with optics." I waited a beat, then said, "It's not about talking. It's about truth." She didn't reply. 2 minutes later, my voicemail dinged. My father's voice, stern and defensive. "Isannah, this is a family matter. Dragging it into court is embarrassing, for all of us. You're forcing our hand here. Click." And Valmai, of course, didn't call. She posted a photo of her looking wistful on a balcony, captioned, "Some people just can't let go." I screenshotted it, timestamped it, and added it to the file. Then I updated the log in my evidence folder. April 15th, contact from Eleanor Walker and Robert Walker. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Focus, reputation, not responsibility. Attempt to redirect narrative. I opened 3 tabs and began reading. Case law, precedent, stories of emotional abuse swept under embroidered rugs in upper-middle-class homes. It wasn't just me, it never had been. That afternoon, I met Mia for coffee. She ordered us both flat whites and pulled out her laptop. "Here's what we're doing," she said. 1. Document everything. 2. Secure any financial records tied to the house. 3. Start building a public-facing narrative, carefully. "I'm not going to war on Instagram," I said. She snorted. "No. But you can't stay silent. Controlled truth is louder than rumors. Quiet precision, nothing messy." I nodded. "This isn't about revenge. It's about history. Mine." She looked at me carefully. "You doing okay?" I thought about it. The bruises had faded, but my body still tensed when I passed reflective surfaces. "My skin's healing," I said. "Now I want to make sure my name does too." She tapped her laptop. "Then this is where we start." Back home, I retitled my main file, Proof Over Pain. Inside were folders, timestamps, footage, screenshots, letters, recordings, each labeled, each undeniable. I sat down to dinner that night, just me, leftover pasta, and the soft hum of my fridge. I didn't light a candle or put on music. I didn't need atmosphere. I needed stillness. I stared out the window. No noise, no ringing, no interruptions. This silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned. I set my fork down, picked up my phone, and stared at the home screen. They would call again. I knew that. But the next time they did, it wouldn't be to tell me I was overreacting. The next time they call, it won't be to ask me to back down. It'll be their lawyer talking to mine. It started with a ping, then another. By the third notification, I turned my phone over, determined not to let the constant buzz dictate my morning. But my curiosity, stubborn and still tender from everything, won out. I opened my messages and found a DM from Monica, a friend I hadn't seen since grad school. Just a link and 3 words. "Have you seen this?" The link opened to an Instagram video, professionally cut, complete with mood music and soft filters. It featured Valmai, of course, standing in a sunlit room, her voice layered over muted footage of the incident at my parents' house. The one where she shoved me. But this version had no sound, just her narration. "Sometimes family disagreements can look worse than they are," she said in a gentle tone, "but you love each other. Even when one person can't let go of the past." I watched in stunned silence as clips rolled by, me gesturing during the confrontation, Valmai backing away, edited to look like she was the one under attack. The rug burn on my cheek, cropped out. The caption read, "Healing takes courage. Some wounds are invisible." Hashtag family. First, hashtag forgiveness. The comments were worse. "You've always been the strong one, Val. People forget the pressure of being the golden child." Stay classy. Let the bitter ones destroy themselves. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just revisionist history, it was character assassination in real time. I felt that burn again, not from the carpet, but from the way the truth was being scrubbed out, replaced by something glossy and convenient. I whispered to myself, they don't just silence you, they replace you. By noon, it got worse. A burner Instagram account started leaking screenshots, cherry-picked messages I'd sent to Valmai over the years. Moments of frustration, raw vulnerability, twisted just enough to seem unhinged. I can't breathe when I'm around you, one message read. But it lacked the context. It followed a week where she'd shown up at my job, unannounced, after ghosting me for months. Whoever was behind the account had time, resources, and motive. I called Mia. They're leaking private messages. This isn't random. And it's organized. She paused. You think it's her? She posted last week about working with a crisis PR team, bragged about how they helped a friend spin a breakup into a brand launch. Mia didn't miss a beat. Then we go legal, cease and desist, and Izzy, save everything, every single comment, screenshot, IP trace, build your wall now, don't wait for them to knock again. I started a new folder under Proof Over Pain, subfolder, Smear Campaign. I went through every message, every photo, every post, time-stamped, annotated, organized. They always wanted me quiet. Now they wanted me discredited, but I wasn't the girl in those screenshots anymore. Later that night, I sat across from my parents at their dining table. They'd asked to talk calmly. I should have known better. I showed them the posts. My father skimmed through them without expression, then shrugged. She's just defending herself. You started this. My mother didn't even blink. If you weren't so sensitive, there'd be nothing for people to say. I stood up, jaw clenched so tightly I felt my molars press. You didn't even ask if it was true, I said. You just assumed I had it coming. They didn't answer. That night, I deleted every voice memo I'd ever made that started with, "Am I overreacting?" The next morning, I drafted a statement. Not for the public, for the court, just facts. No metaphors, no emotion. I uploaded it to Mia's secure cloud with a note. Final version. And then, I made a decision. No more engaging with their version of the narrative. I wouldn't post rebuttals, I wouldn't clap back, I'd weaponize what they feared most, evidence. Instead of posting online, I leaked the cease and desist letter to a small legal blog in Westchester. It was anonymous, precise, and compelling. Within hours, the tone online began to shift. Interesting how fast the victim card gets played when lawsuits show up. Why is Valmai spinning this like a Hallmark movie when there's court filings? People started digging. Her Instagram followers began asking questions she couldn't delete fast enough. I didn't smile, not yet. But I exhaled. I submitted a clean, formatted version of my full testimony to the court. Every file time-stamped. Every quote sourced. I read over the final line before uploading it. I'm not seeking sympathy. I'm demanding accountability. I won't fight for affection anymore. I'll fight for facts. That evening, as I was organizing receipts into folders, my phone lit up. New message from Monica again. She just went live. I opened Instagram and braced myself. Valmai's face filled the screen, makeup slightly smudged, tears running in perfect trails. Her voice cracked as she looked straight into the camera. I tried so hard to be the good daughter, she whispered. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. The jealousy, the threats, it became too much. 30,000 people were watching. Comment hearts floated up the side. She's weaponizing emotion now, Mia texted. They're in panic mode. That's good. I turned the sound off, watched her mouth move, a performance, a crafted narrative. If that was her war cry, I was already loading my evidence. I wasn't even supposed to be at the gala. Mrs. Atkins, my old high school English teacher, had emailed me a week prior, asking if I'd join her at the Larchmont Women's Leadership Awards as her guest. She'd said something about representation and would love for them to see someone who really built something. I didn't ask who them was. I said yes because Mrs. Atkins always saw me, even when no one else did. The event was held at the Community Cultural Center, all white linen and quiet lighting. I wore a navy dress I hadn't taken out of the closet in over a year. I didn't feel powerful in it, but I didn't feel invisible either. Near the end of the ceremony, the host stepped up to the mic, glowing with scripted delight. And now, for our final recognition of the evening, our Community Engagement Innovator Award, honoring a woman whose digital outreach project impacted dozens of women struggling with isolation during the pandemic. I sat up straight. Valmai Fletcher. Applause erupted before my brain caught up. I looked around, momentarily convinced I'd misheard. But then I saw her. Valmai walked across the stage with ease, her white suit crisp, her hair curled into effortless sophistication. The project? Mine. I'd built it. I pitched it. I'd hosted every call and moderated every thread. The original Google Drive folder still bore my initials. She took the mic and said, "This program came from a desire to help women find their voices again, especially those who felt overlooked in their own lives." A spotlight brushed her cheekbone as she smiled. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I clapped, just once, and then stopped. I slipped into the bathroom and shut the stall door. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. I whispered, "They took even this." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, scrolling through everything I had, emails, timestamps, Slack screenshots, all proving the project's origin. The next morning, the world shifted. Mia called. "Your cease and desist letter's circulating." "What?" "Someone leaked it to Legal Frame. It's in their Friday podcast. You're referred to as a credible, documented case of family image manipulation." I listened to the episode in stunned silence. The host read lines from my court filings, redacted, but clearly mine. They discussed the growing trend of social media personalities shielding abusive dynamics behind curated aesthetics. "They're calling her the Instagram sister," Mia said. That afternoon, a local news outlet picked up the story. A brief segment comparing Valmai's online narrative to a sibling reportedly pursuing legal protection. My name wasn't mentioned, but the breadcrumb trail was there. I didn't post. I didn't comment. The public didn't need my voice yet. They needed my facts. The comments rolled in fast. "Something feels off about her brand. Why is she monetizing trauma she might have caused? I used to love her page. Now I'm not so sure." And then, another call, this one from my parents. I opened the door, expecting the worst. I wasn't disappointed. "We need to talk," my father said, stepping in without waiting. My mother followed, arms folded like she was bracing for an earthquake. "You leaked the letter," she snapped. "That was confidential." "I didn't," I replied. "And even if I had, nothing in it was a lie." "You're dragging our name through the mud," my father said, pacing the length of my living room. "Do you know what this looks like?" "It looks like truth catching up to a lie." "This could ruin your sister's career." I tilted my head. "You mean the career she built by stealing my work?" My mother scoffed. "You've always been jealous, Isannah. You just hide it behind facts." My voice stayed calm. "If my legacy depended on everyone else's silence, maybe it's worth burning." They didn't stay long. They left the way they always did, tight-lipped and unresolved. Later that evening, a journalist emailed me. "Would you like to issue a statement regarding the Women's Leadership Award and your involvement in the Digital Outreach Initiative?" I typed one line. "Please ensure that credit for the project is corrected to Isannah Walker. Documentation available upon request." I attached everything. Emails, meeting notes, slides with my watermark. The segment aired the next morning. In recent developments, Larchmont resident Valmai Fletcher's award for community engagement is facing scrutiny after documents surfaced indicating the initiative was spearheaded by her sister, Isannah Walker. The anchor looked directly at the camera and said, "It appears the truth has paperwork." Valmai's PR team released a rushed statement an hour later. The project was a collaborative effort. Credit discrepancies were unintentional. The public wasn't buying it. Comments turned quickly. "We believe the wrong sister. She's a brand, not a person." One user simply posted, How many lies fit behind a smile? For the first time in weeks, I smiled. That night, I lit a candle in the quiet of my kitchen. I didn't celebrate. I calibrated. Mia texted, "You're winning." Quietly. Smartly. At 11:17 p.m., another message came in. Mia again. She called the station, tried to pull the segment. I blinked. Seriously? She threatened legal action. Anchor stood his ground. They've got the receipts. So do you. I put my phone down, sipped my tea, said out loud, "She's not afraid of court. She's afraid of losing the stage." The knock came just as I was clearing breakfast dishes, my coffee half drunk and still warm on the counter. I opened the door to find a courier standing there with a neutral smile, holding a thick envelope in one hand and an electronic signature pad in the other. "Isannah Walker?" he asked. "Yes." "Court delivery." The moment felt anticlimactic. I signed my name with a stylus, took the envelope, and closed the door quietly behind me. My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside, the official notice. Valmai had filed a motion to dismiss the abuse claim. I sank into the couch, document in hand, rereading every line until it blurred. The motion was thin, full of vague language about misinterpretation, family conflict, and a stunning accusation that I had intentionally escalated matters for personal gain. My phone buzzed. Mia. "She's scared," she said. "This is what defense looks like when they don't have facts. Just spin." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I need to get everything in order." "Then do it. Start with the evidence timeline. Every moment you haven't forgotten." That afternoon, my dining table transformed into a war map. Not of cities or terrain, but of memory, screenshots, medical records, security footage, grandma's letter, legal advice I'd printed out and highlighted like a college student prepping for the LSAT. This wasn't just my trauma anymore. This was a trial. I spent hours cataloging everything, each moment a knife I'd learned to dull, now filed carefully for use. The next evening, just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops of Larchmont, there was another knock. I opened the door cautiously. My parents stood there, and behind them, Valmai. They weren't smiling this time. "We wanted to talk," Dad said. No greeting, just an assertion. I didn't invite them in, but I didn't shut the door either. "We think this is getting out of hand," my mother started, eyes darting around the hallway like she expected someone to be recording her. Valmai folded her arms. "We're all exhausted, Isannah. What happened at dinner? We can't go backward, but we can stop it from going forward." I stayed silent. "We thought we could work this out," my father added. "As a family, without dragging everyone through court." "It's not about dragging," I said. "It's about naming." Valmai stepped forward. Her voice softened. "This isn't what Grandma would have wanted. She'd want peace." That was the moment my father dropped to one knee, not in some grand emotional gesture, but with the theatricality of someone desperate to stage a final act. "Please," he said, "you're breaking the family." I studied him, then looked at Valmai, then at my mother. My voice didn't rise. I didn't cry. I just said, "You broke it. I'm just filing the report." And then, gently, I closed the door on them mid-sentence. The house felt quieter than it had in days. I sat at my desk and pulled up the email for Voice Shield, a legal advocacy group that had offered to anonymize survivor stories. I drafted the message earlier. I hit send. 3 days later, the interview aired. My voice was altered, my face hidden behind abstraction. But my story was mine, and it hit like a match on gasoline. Within hours, I was inundated with messages, most anonymous, some public. My sister did the same. "You just helped me feel less alone." "Thank you for naming it. I haven't even told my husband yet, but now I might." "Sometimes your own blood poisons you first." That one. I printed, taped it above my desk. A local podcast replayed parts of the interview. Even without my name attached, people started to connect dots. My name began to trend quietly on local Facebook groups, not as a scandal, as a symbol. Mia came over the next morning, laptop in hand, posture sharp. We took over my dining table again, but this time it wasn't about pain. It was about preparation. She role-played as Valmai's lawyer. "What made you pursue legal action after so many years of silence?" she asked, firm. "Because silence protected them. It didn't heal me," I answered. She raised an eyebrow, nodding. "Good. Less personal. More direct." We rehearsed for hours. Questions, responses, rewordings. I stumbled over one when asked about whether I ever tried to fix things with Valmai. "I tried," I said, "for 30 years. That night, I finalized my evidence binder, clean, indexed, color-coded. I included every relevant document, medical notes, photos, grandma's letter. I put everything into a black zippered case. I labeled it with silver permanent marker, WTR. War to Remember. Later that night, the house was still. I sat on the floor, laptop open, and inserted an old DVD labeled Family, 1997. Home videos flickered across the screen. Birthdays, holidays, piano recitals. Each time, the camera lingered on Valmai. My mother's voice behind the lens, cooing encouragements. Then a quick glimpse, 9-year-old me in the background, waving, small and bright-eyed. My mom cut the recording mid-wave. "They edited me out for years. I'm done being cut." The subject line on the email read, "Witness testimony added." My heart thudded once. I opened it, unsure what name I expected to see, but not his, not Derek. Attached were 3 PDFs, one labeled Statement, one Photos, and the third Exhibits. I opened the statement first. Derek's words unfolded carefully, like he'd chosen each syllable with trembling fingers. He recounted their relationship, his with Valmai, how it began, the charm, the attention, and how quickly it rotted underneath. "She screamed at me for texting a coworker," he wrote. "She once locked herself in my bathroom for 4 hours, saying she needed to reset the power dynamic. She threw a mug once. It shattered against the door frame, didn't hit me, but it wasn't an accident." My fingers hovered over the mouse pad. I kept scrolling. I didn't speak up before because I thought it was just me, but reading Isannah's filing, it wasn't. The photos were worse than I expected. A purple bruise beneath his collarbone, a cracked phone screen, screenshots of apology messages from Valmai, long winding notes of affection laced with guilt and spin. "You know I only react like that when I feel unsafe. It's because I care too much." My throat tightened. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. The quiet validation of someone else's pain mirrored back at me. I whispered the words aloud like they might anchor me. "I'm not crazy." There was a knock at the door just as I closed the laptop. When I opened it, Alethea stood on the threshold, my aunt, the family ghost. She hadn't aged much. Her hair had grayed, but her eyes were still sharp, lined with a kind of patience you only earn through distance. "I heard," she said. I stepped aside. No questions. We drank tea in the living room, the light dimming into dusk. "I always knew you'd have to fight harder," she began. "I did too." I looked at her. "You mean, they pushed you out?" She smiled sadly. "The day I stood up for you, your 13th birthday, you were crying in the garage. Your mom said you were being melodramatic because Valmai had taken your gift and told everyone you'd given it to her." "I remember," I said. "A CD player." "She told you to stop crying. I told her she was being cruel. And that was the last time I was invited for Thanksgiving." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo album. "I kept these," she said, "because I knew one day you might need to remember what it looked like when someone believed you." We flipped through pictures I hadn't seen in years. Me and Grandma baking, me asleep on the porch swing, me grinning with a missing front tooth. And then she handed me a cassette tape. "This, I never meant to keep, but I did. I recorded it because I thought it might help." On the label, Valmai, age 15. She left soon after, and I sat in the quiet with the tape. I borrowed a neighbor's player. No one in my apartment building had one anymore, and hit play. Valmai's voice was unmistakable. I'm so sick of hearing about Isannah. She's always in the background, but somehow people like her more. I hate it. I hate her. Click. No tears. No apology. I slept that night beneath a pile of old memories and new clarity. The next morning, I walked slowly through my apartment. My walls were filled with prints, photos, and quotes I'd collected. But now they were something else, artifacts in a museum of what it took to survive. I reread emails from my mother, one where she reminded me to not wear dark lipstick, it doesn't suit you. Another where she declined to attend my college's honors ceremony, saying it conflicted with Valmai's hair appointment. I opened a file on my computer titled Forgotten Achievements. Inside were scanned award certificates, scholarships, editorials I wrote in high school. Things never framed. Never posted on the fridge. They weren't mad at my silence, I muttered. They were terrified of my potential. My phone buzzed. Mia, we're close. The judge has everything. Prelim is locked. I stood there, letting the words settle. I deserve more than closure, I whispered. I deserve to breathe without guilt. The next afternoon, the local news aired another update. This time, they played it straight. No leaning into drama, just facts. The report outlined both sisters' timelines, a side-by-side of social media projections and legal filings. The word emotional abuse was finally said aloud, not as an accusation, but as context. Tips started rolling into the station anonymously. Co-workers of Valmai, neighbors, a childhood friend. Public opinion didn't swing wildly. It didn't explode. It shifted gradually, like a tide, quiet and undeniable. A message arrived that night. Unknown sender. You just made me brave enough to file a report against my sister. Thank you. I read it 3 times, then I printed it and taped it to the fridge next to a quote from my grandmother. Peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of truth. The day before court, I drove to the courthouse early to review final documents with Mia. But when I pulled into the lot, I saw them first. My parents, Valmai, a local news crew. A soft glow of camera lights. A staged hug. The headline on the screen read, Family Healing Through Hardship. Valmai smiled as if nothing had ever happened. I sat in my car for a long moment, watching them pose. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore, just resolved. They still think this is their story. Tomorrow, I take it back. I arrived early, walking through the heavy courthouse doors before most of the crowd had assembled. I wore a charcoal suit, neutral, tidy, purposeful. My steps echoed on the polished floor as I threaded my way to the front bench. Everything about the room felt clinical. Cold, hard seats, a droning ventilation system humming above, packets of legal pamphlets neatly stacked near the entrance. The air held a sterile tension. My lawyer leaned in as I sat. Remember, she whispered, facts first, emotions second. I nodded. My heart wasn't racing. My mind was focused on what lay ahead. Across the aisle sat Valmai, flanked by the 2 people who raised me and a team of lawyers. She looked composed, almost regal, an actor poised beneath scrutiny. As the judge entered and the room hushed, I thought not of my sister, but into the larger framework of what this was becoming. This was not just the trial of a sister. This was the trial of a system that erased me. When Mia stood, clutching the USB drive, I was calm. Her voice held certainty as she presented it as surprise evidence. My aunt's recording, Valmai's teenage voice breaking free in cruel confession, filled the courtroom. She always gets everything. I hate her. The reaction was instantaneous. Soft gasps, raised eyebrows, quick glances exchanged across rows. I held steady. The video continued to reveal a timeline of erasure from childhood footage to that horrifying night on the living room rug. The camera panned across old photos tied together by betrayal, patterns emerging. Carpet burns met erased identities, all pieced together in silent clarity. I watched the judge's reflection in the wood, eyes attentive, verdict pending. I didn't flinch. I watched the judge, not the screen. Valmai's lawyer rose, attempting to paint me as overly emotional, a fragile sister scorned. He framed my evidence as part of a personal vendetta. But my documentation was methodical, Time-stamped text messages, emergency room notes, the grandmother's letter, security footage, and the property deed showing the house transfer was never legit. One sheet in bold declared that the ownership had reverted by law. When called upon to speak, I rose and felt all the weight fall away. I am not angry. I am exact. My voice was calm, final. On that pageant stage, emotional language might sway a crowd. Here, in the hush of the courtroom, it was precision that mattered. The energy shifted, from sympathy for me to respect. The room leaned in, leaner and quieter. The judge paused, rifled through the evidence one last time. My folder, labeled War to Remember, lay at my side, closed. I held my breath. Then, a soft, decisive twist of the gavel. Restraining order granted. Motion to dismiss denied. Full investigation into financial assets and the deed. Approved. I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding. Valmai's shoulders trembled. A tear slipped down her cheek. My mother moved to usher her out, but camera shutters clicked. Public record, public reckoning. I rose, gathered my folder, and walked out. No words, no triumphant glance, just a folder in hand. Outside, Mia met me. You didn't just win the case, you reclaimed your name. Driving home, I held tight to the steering wheel. The road blurred. In my rearview mirror, I saw them, Valmai and my parents, surrounded by reporters, their faces lit by flashbulbs. They looked unsettled, abashed. No one looked back. They can file motions, I thought, steady on the brake lines. But I filed my truth. I woke up to morning light that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I wasn't used to this peace. My chest felt lighter than it had in years, as though the air itself no longer pressed down. I didn't reach for my phone. Nothing buzzed or blinked, no helicopters of notifications, no expectant pings. Just quiet. I stretched, cold sheets falling away, and let my breath anchor me. In the kitchen, I made coffee slowly, ground beans steeped, warm steam rising. I didn't rush. It was the quietest form of healing I could taste. I called it mine in my head. This morning belongs to me. I stood before the mirror, not to inspect bruises or proof, but just to meet my own eyes, soft, steady, unchanged. I said out loud, I'm not waiting for their apology anymore. Later that morning, I drove to the cemetery. My grandmother's grave waited, roses still pliant with rain. I knelt before the stone, the cold granite reading her name. I did it, Grandma, I said, voice low. I did it the way you would have hated, but the way I had to. The wind shifted, stirring the grass. I left the envelope tucked beneath the marker. Not a full apology, but the ruling folded in. Services. Words. Finality. Walking away, I didn't wait for a sign. Just that moment of release, unspoken permission to heal. I remembered the last time I saw her alive. She'd said quietly, "You were always mine." I lifted a hand, tracing that memory. I held it like a secret. That memory helped me away from the stone, forward. Back at home, my phone chimed with a message notification, but the sender was just Mother. I read only the subject. We didn't think it would go that far. My heart tugged. Maybe it would reach me. Maybe remorse was there, but I turned away. I opened the email briefly, vague, no remorse, just disappointment at the path this has taken. I didn't forward it to my lawyer. I didn't delete it. Instead, I left it unread. Started to type a reply, but every draft felt hollow. So I deleted the words I typed. Thought, sometimes silence is the loudest line I'll ever draw. I created a folder titled History I Won't Repeat and moved the email there. Close the tab, close the memory of what should have been said, but wasn't. That afternoon, I met my closest friend, Olivia, at our neighborhood cafe. The one friend who stayed quietly beside me throughout this ordeal. We ordered tea, sat at a sunlit corner table. She reached across and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. Pause. "Even if they never say it, I need you to hear it." Tears stung unexpectedly, but they weren't tears of anguish. They were tears of being seen in a way that builds instead of breaks. I smiled through them, whispered, "Thank you." We talked about next steps, not revenge, but finding purpose. She asked what I wanted beyond the court. I told her about the idea I'd scribbled in the back of a notebook, a podcast. A small platform to tell stories of family trauma and resilience, without sensationalism, with respect. I said, I don't want to be the girl who sued her family. I want to be the woman who refused erasure. She nodded. I looked at my notes on the table, sketches of episode ideas. Truth, Season 1. The folder felt like a map instead of baggage. I left the cafe carrying it and a steadiness I didn't have before. That evening, I sat at my desk alone for the first time, not feeling lonely. I opened a name change form and started typing. Fill in first and middle name only. No last name, just mine. I hesitated, then saved the draft. Maybe I didn't lose a family. Maybe I lost my place in a lie. The words felt heavy and freeing, written across the page. Then I said quietly to the empty room, and I'm okay with that. The courtroom buzz had dulled into a silence so thick even the air felt still. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Westchester County Courthouse, painting quiet stripes across the wood-paneled walls and catching in the polish of the judge's bench. I sat upright, palms flat on my lap, heart thudding in a steady, relentless beat. Not from fear, but finality. I wasn't here to win. I was here to end it. Judge Randall leaned forward, spectacles slipping just enough on his nose to make him glance over them. His voice was calm, measured, like he was reading a grocery list. On the matter of Isannah Marie Walker versus Valmai Fletcher, this court finds the defendant legally responsible for assault and reputational damage stemming from sustained campaigns of defamation, psychological harm, and the incident of physical aggression recorded on March 14th. There was a collective intake of breath. Then nothing. He continued. A permanent restraining order is to be enforced effective immediately. Financial damages in the amount of $290,000 are awarded to the plaintiff. Furthermore, due to fraud and coercion in the property deed transfer, full ownership of the property located at 146 Greenwood Drive is hereby returned to Isannah Marie Walker. Still, no one moved. Even the stenographer had paused, just for a moment. The silence in that room didn't feel like relief. It felt like an earthquake just before the aftershock. Valmai stared forward, frozen. Her lips parted slightly like she'd just now understood she might not talk her way out this time. But I didn't look away. I wanted her to see me. All of me. The version she tried to erase. I stood slowly, meeting her eyes across the room. No dramatics. No shaking voice. Now you're the one watching from the sidelines. I didn't blink. Outside, the flashbulbs of a dozen reporters went off as I stepped onto the marble steps, their questions colliding in a frenzy. Isannah, any words for your sister? How does it feel to win? What's next for you? But I just walked through them. Quiet power feels different. It doesn't roar, it resonates. That same afternoon, Valmai posted a video. Just her face against a stark white background, voice trembling in the way she thought conveyed humility. I was misunderstood. That courtroom didn't know my truth. People saw what they wanted. Within hours, it was gone, but not before clips exploded across every news cycle. The New York Chronicle called it the least apologetic apology of the decade. One blogger wrote, "You can't spin accountability into victimhood, Valmai. This isn't theater, it's justice." Our parents, predictably, released a statement, carefully worded. Phrases like deep regret and no sides taken danced around the actual issue like it was a crack in the floor they refused to acknowledge. They were more concerned with optics than honesty, as usual. But what struck me most wasn't the noise. It was the quiet messages that arrived late into the evening. A former English teacher emailed me, "You always sat in the front row. I should have asked why you stopped." A second cousin I hadn't spoken to in 15 years messaged, "I saw everything back then. I'm sorry I didn't say anything." Each message ended the same way. Some variation of, "I'm sorry I stayed quiet." I sat on my couch in the dark, watching the city lights blink below. Their silence protected her. Mine saved me. 2 weeks later, I stood at the front of a small legal workshop in a university lecture hall, speaking not about pain, but procedure. I shared anonymized slides from my own case, timelines, evidence prep, courtroom strategies, no dramatics, no tears, just information, tools. Trauma can drown in detail, I said to the room, but recovery floats on structure. You can't heal what you're still trying to hide. Afterward, a young woman, barely 19, approached me. Her hands shook as she held her phone. "You gave me a roadmap," she said. "My mom's, like your sister. I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that out loud." I didn't hug her. I didn't have to. She already knew. Back home, I opened a fresh document on my laptop and titled it, "Cut from the Camera." A memoir, not of survival, but of the systems we build when family becomes the battlefield. That same night, my inbox pinged with an offer from the Family Advocacy Network. They wanted to give me a permanent segment, Family Truths. Not for entertainment, for education, for exposure, real stories, real strategies. I didn't smile for the announcement photo. I looked into the lens like I did in court, steadily. Weeks passed. I filed the last bit of paperwork, legally removing Walker from every document I owned. Driver's license, birth certificate, medical forms, passport, done. At the inheritance office, I signed a formal notice. All future claims from the Walker or Fletcher families regarding the estate of Isannah Marie are to be legally contested and denied. My name, my terms. I walked into my new recording studio, still faintly smelling of fresh paint, and placed a small photo on the desk. Me and Grandma June, both laughing, mid-stir over a bowl of cookie batter. The quote underneath read, "Some names are inherited, others are earned." Then I slid on my headphones, tested the mic, and hit record. This isn't about revenge. This is about removal. My voice didn't tremble. It carried. I'm not asking to be heard anymore. The final words echoed through the studio like a promise. Not to them. To me. That afternoon, I walked past a newsstand in Midtown. There, above the fold, was the headline, "Valmai Fletcher's Downfall, Sister Speaks Truth." A photo of me, not smiling, just standing still in front of the courthouse. I bought the paper. Back home, I folded it with care and slipped it into an envelope addressed to 146 Greenwood Drive, our childhood home. No note, just the truth, printed, sealed, and sent back where it all began. As I locked my studio for the night, I looked out at the skyline. One last narration drifted in my mind, unspoken but complete. They filmed me on the floor. I just filmed the comeback. My silence was never weakness. It was the pause before impact.